Deepest mystery of all. Sulfur slightly lowers the melting point of iron, and iron oxide and iron sulfide have formed on the surface of the structural steel. Sulfur used with thermite is called thermate, producing even faster results.
Well, this is very interesting. It turns out that there's chemical analysis performed on this previously molten metal. This chunk, for instance, a piece of which was sent to Dr. Stephen Jones, whom we'll be hearing from shortly, and he finds that this is predominantly iron. So he rules out aluminum from the jet plane, and it has abundant manganese. So he rules out structural steel as a major component. So it's not melted steel. Where does iron come from? Iron is a part of structural steel, but this is not that. It came from some other source. We don't use iron anymore in building materials, and it has manganese and fluorine in abundance. This is quite peculiar because manganese is from the potassium permanganate, which is commonly used as an oxidizer in thermite. And fluorine is used primarily in sol-gel type thermite charges. These together are the fingerprint of thermite. But what about all of that dust? Laid throughout lower Manhattan, 90,000 tons of concrete pulverized to a fine powder, laid in a blanket 4 to 12 inches thick. Here's some here. It was sent to Dr. Jones, 4 separate samples, one across the street in an apartment, one on top of the skyscraper 2 to 3 blocks away, another one collected just 10 minutes after the collapse on the Brooklyn Bridge. What is so interesting about this? What do they find? Well, in all of the dust samples, not only the teams of scientists find these, but R.J. Lee, an environmental consultant, and USGS find billions of these spheres. Well, how did they get there? And they're iron, interestingly enough. So they're previously molten. Well, if there were thousands of thermite cutter charges placed throughout the columns and beams in the buildings, and under explosive conditions, it would disperse that thermite, not dissimilar from the spray out of a bottle where its liquid is atomized. It forms itself into a sphere by surface tension. Then it falls and cools and lands with all of the dust. This is the only rational explanation for the billions of these spheres found in the samples. So, Dr. Jones does X-ray energy dispersive spectroscopy on the spheres, and he determines that they're curiously similar to ignited thermite from a controlled experiment. Again, USGS finds these spheres. They're iron. R.J. Lee finds them. They're iron. They're about the width of a human hair, very tiny spheres. So Dr. Jones concludes that given the trace metals mixed in here, it's clear that it's a significant evidence for aluminothermic reactions. Furthermore, he takes the next step that no one had taken, and he asks himself, what would have been in the original recipe, if you will, the chemical makeup of unignited thermite? And would you find any of that in the dust? Well, we'd be looking for powders of aluminum, iron oxide, copper oxide, and other materials. And guess what? He found it. I'd like to introduce you to one of the chief scientists on the international team who continues his investigation into the World Trade Center dust, Dr. Stephen E. Jones, Emeritus Professor of Physics. Dr. Jones has published over 50 peer-reviewed scientific papers in established journals, including Scientific American and Nature. His PhD research was conducted at Stanford Linear Accelerator Center. Dr. Stephen Jones.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Richard. Richard is quite a spokesman, I must say. He's wonderful, and I'm very glad to be here. If I can get my Apple to work here today for us. As Richard said, let's see, do I need to try this one more time? I'll do this one more time here. Sometimes in the transition. Okay. Sometimes in the transition to another computer, there's just a little time element here. I should be there though. Mook, do you have that? No. Nope.
The projector, we have it here.
The projector is the... Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start. Wow, Richard has just summarized. Mook wants me to take a little time here. Okay, I will follow the guidance of man filming things. Let me say, while they're getting that projector warmed up, yes. Okay, as I've described these results to scientists around the world, I had one scientist in America who told me, he said, you know, these results from a scientific point of view are very exciting. It's quite an adventure to see this these data come together and support this hypothesis of controlled demolition. He said it's remarkable. I mean, it's such a hypothesis. It seems so far-fetched, and yet all the evidence is lining up. As he looked at it, he agreed that the case was compelling for controlled demolition. Then he said, but I'm sad for my country, you see. And this is certainly an important issue. Still having trouble with the projector? Maybe I'll just, okay. Let me just talk a little bit about my involvement and how I got started, which was in 2005, in April of, oh, we're starting to get it, great. And it was with the collapse of World Trade Center 7 that Richard has talked about, and David, and I appreciate their eloquence. Now we have slides that we can look at. These are photographs through a microscope of these amazing red-gray chips that we found in the World Trade Center dust. We all saw that dust, this voluminous dust. Well, in the dust there are large numbers of these chips that looked like this red material. Initially I thought, or early on, I thought that this might be paint chips, so I'll talk about that in a moment. We looked and analyzed very carefully 4 independently collected samples. The chain of custody is very well established, as described in our paper. In addition to what is in our peer-reviewed paper on the chain of custody question, we also have videotapes of the persons collecting this, testifying how they collected it, where they collected it, when they collected it, and how it came to the scientists on our team, not just to me, but to other scientists as well.
Coming up in the next segment, Stephen Jones continues his lecture on the discovery of active explosive materials found in the World Trade Center dust.